Hey guys, it's me, Chelsea, and we're back at it again. So this week I have already started this because I had previously made a video and Salem ruined it, so we have to start all over again. Anyways, we're going to be talking about Waco this week. I watched the first, well, they're not the first, there's 3 episodes, they're about 45 minutes apiece to half, 55 minutes, and we'll go over that again. Anyways, we're going to start off with David Koresh. David Koresh was born on August 17th, 1959, as Vernon Wayne Howe. They said that his childhood was, he grew up with a couple siblings. They said that, he was kind of shy, timid. There was reported sexual abuse. David grew up like a very sheltered kind of child. He grew up and, started thinking about different things, such as where's God? A lot of his previous partners said that he had multiple nervous breakdowns, that he would hallucinate and try to figure out where God was, that he was seeing things, that he was trying to figure out his spirituality. So he kind of went off the rails a little bit, and he found this group in a place called Mount Carmel, which is in Waco, Texas. Upon this group, the leader of this group was named Lois Roden. Now, while he was trying to conform to this group and, find God, find his spirituality, he was also learning from Lois. Lois had a husband that's name was Benjamin, and also a son that was named George Roden. Now, David was trying to seduce Lois, which was the leader of this group called the Davidian group, which resided in Mount Carmel. I think that this tactic was gross and sick, but he was trying to learn different things from her as a leader. And so, he was doing that for a while, and Lois passed away. When Lois passed away, David wanted to take over her position as leader of the Davidian cult. And this came as a problem because after she passed away and he was trying to take over, the spot was supposed to go to her son George. In the midst of all this, there commenced a shootout between the followers of the Davidian cult and George Roden and his father, maybe. But it was mostly between David Koresh and Lois's son, George Roden. In the midst of all this, they did get arrested, and they were not charged. It didn't make it to trial, is what I'm trying to say. So when David Koresh came back to the community, he took over Lois's position, which fucking sucked for, her son, because that was his position. I can't even imagine trying to seduce a lady that's 50 years older than me, which David Koresh seemed to have mental problems anyway, so, in spite of, him trying to find God and all this other bullshit, he was trying to seduce this lady and take over her position, which worked because that's what happened. Now, in the midst of, I keep saying that, I'm trying to take over her position, he gained all the followers. And he had followers that he had already made beforehand, before even moving to Mount Carmel, which was, I took notes for this exact reason. He met a man named David Troubadour. He met him in Los Angeles before moving to the community, or maybe in the middle, maybe he visited Los Angeles, but I'm not exactly sure because I went over that and I think he may have went there beforehand and visited. Anyways, he met David Troubadour. David Troubadour thought, oh man, I really want to figure out the search for God. I want to try to find my own spiritual way. So David Koresh, of course, all the followers he already had, he coerced David Troubadour into moving all the way to Texas to join this community, the Davidian community, which was very small. And at the time, the community was small, but then it turned out very large. Now, David was, like I said, he was not right in the head. He had multiple wives, and it was said that during this time, that when he was teaching about God's way, he did it every single day. There was a meeting every single day during this community. And there was a lot of women and there was a lot of men followers. Now, a lot of these men and women followers were married. And it is said that David said that you cannot have sexual relations with your wife. They can only have sexual relations with me. Which is really fucked up. So, he was also in this thing, he was accused of having relationships with underage girls, which was true because one of his wives was 14 when they married and they had children. So he was definitely doing that, and he had multiple wives, and he was, like I said, he had multiple wives, and he had multiple children. His first wife, like I said, she was 14, and I believe her name was Kathy Schroeder, and they married. She was a advocate follower. Like, I believe when they married, they were not actually living at Mount Carmel, that she moved because she wanted to find God, and she believed that they would do this, and they wanted to live for God. So they joined this community and they came up with a compound, which had all these followers in the midst of all this shit. Kathy was such a devoted follower, of course, because she was brainwashed, that she did not mind any of these things going on about David. You know, he had all these wives, so she really didn't care. She just believed that he was the second coming. David Koresh himself believed he was the second coming, that he was the Messiah, that, he convinced his followers to the point where they believed that the apocalypse was coming, and that he told them that the government was going to come knock on their door, and that they were going to have the fight of their lives, and they would have to go out in flames. You know, this is what he told them, you know. They were his followers. They believed him. As any other brainwashed follower would do. I mean, look at Jim Jones and the Kool-Aid thing. But this is many, many, many years after all of that. Now, we're going to start off with how it actually began from Waco. Because, like I said, I have my notes here. Alright, so the day of when all this shit started was February 28th, 1993. Now, how this started was there was a postman that was delivering packages and noticed a grenade slipped out of one of the packages. He alerted law enforcement, and law enforcement was getting involved very quickly. And they found out because there was actually an undercover law enforcement agent named Robert Rodriguez that entered the compound, and he was pretending to be a follower of David Koresh. So he was listening to everything David Koresh was preaching about, telling his followers, you know, he was in the midst of all this. Now, after the law enforcement got a hold of all the illegal ammo and guns, I mean, they were manufacturing illegal ammunition and illegal guns, assault rifles. They were having grenades shipped in. You fucking name it. There was a whole room with just manufactured machine guns, ammo, grenades, everything. Because they were waiting for the apocalypse to happen. They were waiting for what David Koresh said, that the government was going to come knock on their fucking door and they would have to have the fight of their fucking lives. They were waiting for it. So they got tipped off. Law enforcement decided, hey, we're going to go in. We're going to get ATF agents involved. We're going to serve a search warrant, and we're going to get all of these illegal ass weapons out of this place. And then we're going to arrest David Koresh. Now, on the same day, there was a man sitting on the side of the road. And I don't know what was going on, but the postman that came through was one of David's followers. And he stopped and he said, hey, what's going on? What are you doing here? And the dude said, we're getting ready to raid the compound. They had no idea that this dude was a follower. I believe his name was Kenny Jones, maybe. And he was, he had a wife and children as well in the compound. And one of them was David's wife's as well. So he tipped off David Koresh when he came back and said, hey, look, they're about to serve us a search warrant for you, and they're going to raid us. And he was like, he started getting sketchy and weird, and everybody started noticing what was going on. So in this process, they start loading up on fucking guns, ammunitions, AK-47s, whatever you could fucking think of. Everybody had a damn gun in their hand waiting on the ATF agents to come and raid them. So they were waiting on that. The ATF agents got two cattle trucks, had like, I don't know, there was a bunch of ATF agents hiding in the back under a tarp. And they start rolling towards the compound. They roll towards the compound, and then one of them gets out, knocks on the door, pounds on the door, says, hey, we've got a search warrant, come out. David comes out and says, David Koresh, he says, get off my property. And he's like, you're not supposed to be here. He said, we have a search warrant, you're coming in, we're gonna, raid this place. He says, you're not coming in. So then begins the process of they're all holding themselves hostage. David Koresh and his followers are not coming out of the compound. They're loaded up on guns, ammunitions, like I said. And so then the shooting begins. And it's said that the followers and David Koresh started shooting first. And then the ATF started shooting back. And it was like a fucking war zone. So they're shooting at each other. It's a fucking war zone. There's machine guns going off. People are getting killed. Women and children are getting killed. And David's like, if we go out, we're going out together. We're going out in flames for God. Because, that was his whole thing. He brainwashed his followers. So the ATF agents were like, they were in a fucking war zone battle for like 5 hours with a ton of people fucking killed. And then they got a hold of David. And then the negotiating begins. So, while they were stockpiling all these weapons and shit, and they should have known better, they even said that they shouldn't have just went in there and just started fucking raiding them. But they did. So now all these people are dead, and the rest of the followers are, inside. They're not going to come out. And I'm using Nebula today. And so they're like, what do we do? So they start negotiating with Koresh. And this was a very long process. Because Koresh was so convinced that he was the second coming. And he was like I said, he was so convinced he was the second coming, the Messiah. He was not coming out. He was prepared to, go out in blaze of glory for God. And, like I said in all this other bullshit, these people were brainwashed. So you gotta think, how far would this Davidian religious cult go to make a scene, to, make a stamp in history where, they're not giving up their faith to become, not prophets of God, because that's what they were doing. Could David Koresh brainwash these people so much that they would do anything that he said, So this was a 51-day standoff. These people were sitting in this compound with machine guns, with children and men and women, for 51 days. This was up until April 19th of 1993. And there was so much talk, and fucking this was on the news. This was a big fucking deal. Because this is kind of like, like when there's a terrorist attack. Fucking Waco was kind of like a terrorist attack. And the funny thing about it is, David Koresh believed all of his bullshit, and they had shot him, and he was negotiating with these people, and he was dying in the process of negotiating with ATF agents to come out. I mean, it's crazy. One of his followers, like I said, was his wife, Kathy, and she actually came out on day, I don't know, it was like 33 or 34, and when she came out, she went to prison, obviously, because they killed a bunch of ATF agents in the process of this being raided. Now, also, she said that David was 33 when, he died in the process of this bullshit too. That there was a lot of similarities between him and Christ. So, I mean, that even upped his ego for being who he was and having all of these followers. So, I can't help to think, he was mentally ill, but I mean, when he was doing this, he was sending videos to the negotiators and to the news saying, put me on Christian, there's like a Christian broadcast show. Please put me on this to give it to my followers, or else I'm not letting anybody else go. That he was letting children out 2 by 2, kind of like Noah's Ark. So it was all a game to him. It was a religious game to him to do this. And, he was dying in the process of doing all this negotiation tactics and not letting people out. He was letting people out simultaneously because they were negotiating with him and there was no other way. Now, the way that I see this is he brainwashed his followers to the point where they just could not think for themselves. Like, they were living on this 77-acre compound in Mount Carmel, away from society. Like, you knew no different. Even David Troubadour, the one that he convinced to follow him, was like, it was just a different way of life. It felt like a different dimension, a different era. So, I firmly believe that he got so far into their heads that these people just wouldn't come out, and while they were manufacturing fucking machine guns and all this awful shit to try to get the government to stay away from them. But it's like they started the bullshit with manufacturing all this illegal weaponry. So I feel like if they would have gave themselves up in the early process, it wouldn't have come down to them having to kill so many of their own followers. But it wouldn't have been any other way for them, I guess, because Kathy Schroeder even said we were the key to, it was the key to our eternity. You know? So I just think that if you can get so far into somebody's head that they firmly believe that you're the Messiah and the second coming to God, that you can do anything you want to do, because he had corrupted and brainwashed these people's minds. Now, let me look at, I'm reviewing my notes for this too as well, so I don't want to get anything wrong. I want to be logistic. Even when they were trying to come out, they were like, the ATF agents were slowly trying to get in. That if they would, their followers said that if they would come in, they're going to commit suicide. They're going to commit mass suicide because they're dying for God. So she was like, you know, that we're God's tools. They were in the process of throwing fucking hand grenades out the window and using AK-47s on ATF agents just to prove that, you know, we're people of God. But I don't understand how that makes any sense. Because would God want us to be using machine guns on each other and hand grenades just to prove that, you know, the prophet is here? I don't believe that. Basically, when they served that search warrant, fucking all hell broke loose and they started shooting. So, I mean, I firmly believe they were the first to cause this whole bullshit, but I just can't get behind the process of wanting to be in a religious cult that you had to share your wife. You could not have sexual relations with your wife. You had to have multiple children out of your own will. Every day was like a mind fuck for these people, but they had no clue because they were brainwashed. Now, on this 51-day standoff, it was very hard for the followers to think any other way. They seen their family basically murdered around them, and they're sitting in the middle of a compound that they won't leave, and all these people are murdered in there. Basically what happened at the end was that on April 19th, there was a representative. I think her name was, oh man, I can't remember her name. Janet Reno. She said, we're going to put tear gas in there and we're going to get them out. So I guess they threw tear gas in there. They started coughing and they started hyperventilating, and a bunch of them came out. But David Koresh would not come out, and a lot of his followers still would not come out. They were going to die in there for God. Now, also, after they threw the tear gas in there, this was day 51. They spent 51 fucking days in this compound just waiting, because they were not gonna die the way that the government or these ATF's agents or these negotiators are wanting them to die. Okay, they're gonna die on their own free will, which was under the hands of God. I'm guessing that they set fire to the building because half of the building went in flames. David was already wounded and dying, so there was not really any proposition there. He wasn't coming out. He's going to die in there. half of the building went in flames. And a lot of these people fucking died because the compound exploded. And it was really sad for a lot of these followers, because the ones that did come out that didn't go to prison, which most of them did go to prison, I believe, besides the children, were, their families were dead. They were, they got shot by the ATF, or the people inside shot them, and like I said, a lot of these followers' families died inside the compound because of David Koresh, because of him brainwashing all these people into believing that they're going to spend eternity with him, the prophet, and in the great beyond, and that maybe they would come back after they died and be part of his initial plan. I don't know what his plan was. He thought he was the second coming. Who fucking knows what he thought? He's mentally ill, obviously. And you might come off saying, oh, hey, these people had a right to do what they did and all this other bullshit. But, I firmly believe that if you're willing to die for your faith, that I don't think that there's something mentally ill wrong with you, but I think that a lot of what he did and said and handled the situation was that this was a cult. And this is a following, and these people were very much ensued in this whole proposition that they were beyond what this earthly world even stood for, And I mean, the whole time, I can't get past the point of them manufacturing fucking machine guns they were just gearing up for this bullshit, It's like David was ready to kill them all. He did not care. He didn't care so much that he ended up murdering himself in the process of being in the compound for 51 days. So I wouldn't put nothing past this man. What really is fucking weird is that this was a connection to the Oklahoma City bomber. And that happened on, I believe, October. Lord, I don't know. Hold on. I know it was in here somewhere. Yeah, it was a connection. It was a connection to the dude Timothy McLee and Terry Nichols. And one of them was actually in the video from Waco. And it was like a whole spin-off of Waco from the Oklahoma City bomber, because it happened literally 2 years on the same day on April 19th, 1995. And I think this was in October of 1990. Well, no, the beginning of it was, I think, somewhere around there. But it was on April 19th, 95. It was 2 years later. I don't want to get my facts wrong yet again. But he did it. It feels like a very much a terrorist attack. Both of them just feel like terrorist attacks to me. But the only difference is one was a religious attack. So, yeah. I don't know, man. What do you think about dying in a cult? I mean, honestly, because I can't get over how fucking crazy David Koresh was. Like, if you want to go on there and watch it on Netflix, do it. Because it was such a great documentary. And I really got involved in it. Like, the fact that somebody can brainwash you to the point that you do something as crazy as this is just beyond me. You're gonna die in a religious cult. Like I said, it brings me back to like the Jonestown murder where they all drank the Kool-Aid together, and I believe that these people were ready to do just that for David Koresh. I just feel like he was a very sick individual, or a sick man, and he put that on his followers, and it's very sad. And it's something that a lot of people, especially the victims out of this, will never get over. Half of them sit in prison after David Koresh was dead, after the standoff, for years. And you gotta think too, after something like that and you live, how do you rewarp your mind to not feel like you're still brainwashed by the same follower? Because your way of thinking, is it going to be the same? Is it going to be different? How are you going to change your thinking back to the way it was before you were fucking corrupted and manipulated into thinking things that aren't true? You know? He manipulated and gaslighted these people to the point where they couldn't even think for themselves. And I think it's just a very sad outcome for these people in Waco. And I can't imagine having to live a life after that, because you wouldn't even know where to begin. You wouldn't know things to do for yourself. Every day just feels like a vast blur. And I couldn't imagine trying to get out of that stage of my life after all that happened, because you know that they have like fucking PTSD from all the bullshit that they were told and all the murder that they've seen all in the process of all of this. Like, it's just awful. But yeah, if you want to go watch the Waco documentary, please do. I tried to explain it the best I could, but you know, I'm going to leave some things out because this is kind of just like a shortcut to the whole documentary, because there's 3 episodes. They're about an hour and a half to an hour long, and you're going to get bits and pieces, but like, for the most part, yeah, it was just a big clusterfuck of bullshit upon David Koresh's part. And I feel like the whole thing could have been prevented. And even the ATF soldiers that went in there and were wounded said that this could have been prevented. Like, but in the long run, I don't know how it could have been prevented, because they would have had to done the same thing. Serve them search warrants, but they would have still had illegal fucking machinery, illegal fucking weapons. They would have still been throwing hand grenades out windows. I mean, it was just an act of fucking violence. It was awful. But yeah, that's my whole bullshit rant on Waco, which I thought the whole documentary was well represented and it was pretty accurate to a T. And I had waited a very long time to watch it, but I think that even with my shortcut of the documentary, I think you should still go watch it and see what you think. And you tell me your opinions on David Koresh, because honestly, I do not like him very much. Even after he fucking died and all of this bullshit, I still like his way of thinking, because his way of thinking was very manipulative, ugly, cult-like, and I just I don't like it. I don't like the whole feel of that, trying to brainwash people into thinking the way you do. So, that's my end for the Waco video, and if you guys like this, please go on my YouTube and subscribe to Hippy Dippy Gypsy, and like and subscribe to me, and I'm going to be coming out with another video here soon. Not sure what I'm going to be talking about in that video, but I will get something to talk about, believe me. Alright, thank you guys. See you later.